It's Mountain Monday. You know what to do. Breathe in. And out. And breathe in. And out. And you may notice I sound a little different this Mountain Monday. It's because I'm using a different microphone. Our snazzy handheld mic, we think, got left at a shoot last week. And so we have to go back and retrieve it. But unfortunately, it's a long weekend in Canada this week. And so that won't happen until Tuesday at the earliest. We have to make sure we did, in fact, leave it there first. But so it'll probably be a couple days of using a lavalier mic instead of a hand mic, but we'll make do, right? And today is another special occasion, so to speak. Today is my birthday. Hey, yay, another year around the sun. And normally I wouldn't release that sort of information, but in this case it's already out there. That's the weird thing about being a public person, being a quote-unquote notable enough person to have a Wikipedia entry, is they publish your birth date. My date of birth is now publicly known information. It's a weird, weird time to live in that way. Some of the, one of the things I've been really struck by in going back and doing my History of Feminism for Gamers series is how much the amount of information we have access to affects how things work. Human nature doesn't change, but the amount of information we have to react to does. And it was so much easier to streamline a message and so much easier to stay on topic when there was just less information in a public debate. And I am convinced now that this is impacting history and it's impacting politics. It is so easy to smear a person now. And there's nothing most people can do about it. Defamation cases are so expensive that only the very rich can bother to even file them. Because I don't know if you guys know very much about lawsuits, but the minute you sue or get sued, that's $3,000 out of your pocket. Boom, lawyer takes it, done. And it usually doesn't stop there. It's not like people are led to believe based on TV that they get paid at the end. They give you a bill at the end. No, you have to pay as you go, especially with things like defamation cases or any sort of civil law as opposed to criminal law. Because in criminal law, you have the right to a defense. In civil law, lawyers want to get paid up front because a lot of the time cases are dropped, there's a settlement, and especially in defamation, it's usually take the content down or else. That's basically what defamation is, unless you are arguing that they have already done such damage to your reputation that you are entitled to financial compensation. And that's tough to prove on the modern internet. You actually have to have lost work or suffered financial hardship. It's not, well, people said some mean things to me. That's not sufficient damage to reputation to assign a dollar value to it. You actually have to say, well, I was blackballed at these outlets, or these people got rid of me because of what you said. And it's really hard to prove causation, because of course those people don't want to go on the record because they don't want to get sued. So defamation has become a slap fight for the very wealthy. There are a few cases where people felt like they were so defamed that it was worth the money. Normally that's something like, somebody got labeled a terrorist. Because that's easy to prove. You end up on watch lists. You're not allowed to travel to certain places. There's a simple cause and effect there. Those are easier to prove. But in terms of loss of work because somebody spread garbage about you, that's tougher, especially in this day and age where people seem to be rewarded for infamy, not for being right. If you're prepared to say all these outrageous statements and stand by them no matter what, you can do well, both on the left and the right. Neither of them are absolved of this, because for every, like, Rush Limbaugh or God knows how many YouTube personalities, we have somebody like, Keith Olbermann, who did a regular Worst Person in the World series. Worst person in the world, and strangely that worst person in the world was never, a dictator using child soldiers. It was some US politician. It's absurd. It's absurd the way the discourse has gone, but there are good reasons for this. And that is that the news is no longer driven by things that a newsroom thinks it's important that people know. Newsrooms are driven now by things they think people want to know. And that's a very different paradigm. And I'm talking about this today because a couple people have asked me privately about various news practices and things like that. And I don't know what to tell them anymore, because I've noticed this myself, that people are more likely to believe something because it's in print on a website than I thought. I'm very skeptical. I'm very, very skeptical of articles, especially articles on certain sources. A source has to be pretty consistent for me to just accept what they write, because I've just been working in, news gathering of some form or another too long to really accept things on face value. It is now officially half my life that I have been working in the media in some way. I started when I was 19. Do the math there. But it's officially half my life now. And, this is, I started so young that this is why I say, like, look, this idea that someone has to pay for college and go through for a 4-year communications or a 4-year journalism degree to start and then actually learn the realities of journalism. I don't know why we don't take eager kids who have worked with their school newspapers and worked, have shown some get up and go at the high school level, and put them in a 2-year apprenticeship course with a reputable news service and train journalists that way. And the reason I say this is that as someone who sat in, the Journalism 101 courses and then actually had to go out and do it, those courses, I won't say they're useless, but if you've worked on a school newspaper, you have what, you can be taught in a Journalism 101 course. It's much better to just get out there and start doing it, because then you learn the realities of the job. And the realities of the job are significantly different than what, and yes, that was Loki snarling Lagarto. Sorry, guys. Loki is out of sorts lately. You may have seen the tweet or the Facebook post. My dog injured his ACL, I think it's tendon, ligament, something like that, in one of his back legs. So he is super out of sorts. So yes, that was Loki. But the thing about taking a journalism course or reading about journalism best practices or, ethics guidelines or things like that is knowing it and applying it are radically different things. 90% of ethical journalism is having the intestinal fortitude to apply the ethics that you learned in terms of journalistic ethics and find a way to weigh them with the very real business pressures of modern news. Because, you know, the business reality of being a reporter nowadays is if you don't produce, you don't get paid, right? If you don't produce some sort of content, you're not worth very much to anybody. Speed matters, but accuracy matters as well. So when you sacrifice speed for accuracy and when you sacrifice a degree of accuracy for speed, that comes with experience. That comes with doing it. And you don't get that in a classroom. The environment is too pristine. Like, yes, some courses deliberately make it difficult for students to get the things done on time. Every year at a certain time, I get at least one request from somebody from Ryerson or somebody from, you know, communications at York, and they're asking me to do an interview because they need it for a project. And it's amazing how few of them ask to meet in person. It's amazing how few of them asked to even talk on the phone. It's just, can I send you some email questions? And it's like, whatever, if that's how you want to do the interview, go for it. But, and there is something to be said for email questions because then you don't have to transcribe. And the person being interviewed has the ability to write things exactly as they want them. Because more and more it's becoming important to get exactly what you say transferred through the press. But part of face-to-face journalism used to be the role of the reporter getting a sense of the person so that you could contextualize for your readers what they're like. You know, that's why you see in things like, you know, Vanity Fair, these long-form articles, descriptions of what they're wearing, where the interview took place. The problem is that those descriptions are often blown out by this really fancy, you know, fashion style editorial photography that, you know, they'll be wearing this glittering evening gown and all these hair extensions and tons of makeup. And then the article talks about how they're wearing, you know, minimal makeup and a black turtleneck. But that's not what you're imagining when you're reading their words. You're imagining this image that's staring back at you doing the talking, not the person who actually, you know, in that place, in that time, had, you know, had those things to say. And that's the mystique of media. And I'm sure you're asking right now, is it really that different? Yes. As someone who has been in both spaces, you feel different when you are covered in a ton of makeup and wearing somebody else's hair than you do when your hair is just wash and wear and you may have put on a bit of concealer and some mascara and that was it that day. When you're dressed up like that, you feel like a combination of a superhero and an alien. When you're just you feel like you. And that's why personas are so important to performers. That's why, you know, getting in character is so important to an actor. What makes me different, and the thing I'm proud about in my coverage, is I'm not showing up and observing something I've never done myself. I am partaking in someone else's process as another creator, as somebody who had to create entertainment for quite a few years. And somebody who understands those deadlines, somebody who understands, you know, the public feedback process, which is very rewarding and very draining at the same time. You know, you have these amazing highs of somebody who was saying, you know, I was contemplating suicide and I was alone in my apartment and I turned on the TV and you made me laugh and I got through the night and I'm still here today. And that's freaking powerful, right? But for every one of those, you have dozens and dozens and dozens of people who decide that they are going to personally tell you how lousy they think you are. Not a particular show, not a particular joke that didn't work, you know, not a segment they especially didn't like. You as a person or you as a professional are just garbage. That's all they want to focus on, just the bad stuff. And that's the thing that's so frustrating after a while, is not that it hurts, because a person can only take so much hurt before that part shuts down, right? And it's not useful. And the brain has this wonderful ability to shut down the processing of information it determines to not be important. That's why, you know, people who have had something monumental happen to them can't remember what they had for breakfast that day. It wasn't really important to the important stuff. And so you end up tuning it out. And it makes it really, really hard to then figure out what to let back in. Because so many people deciding it's their purpose in life to tell you you're garbage and you're not, so that person is not objective. And that's what the thing really is. Like this whole thing about constructive criticism or the sandwich method or the thing that people sort of poo-poo online as being inauthentic or just politically correct. It's not. What constructive criticism techniques force you to do as somebody giving criticism is making sure you're staying objective. The reality is that in most AAA games, saying it's just absolute garbage is not true. There is something good about that product. The product on the whole may not be good enough to spend a very high, you know, full price cost of a AAA video game on, and the DLC might not be worth the cost, but to say there's nothing redeeming about it at all, you've lost your objectivity. And this happens as well when people just suddenly up and call someone a liar with no proof, when they start making judgments of someone's character based on, like, entire character based on a tweet or a series of tweets. It shows a loss of objectivity, which makes the feedback useless. And it's too much energy on a daily basis, on that daily grind of producing content regularly, for someone to filter that all the time. It takes more time for someone to process something that's emotional logically. So most people just don't bother doing it. And then, you know, people wonder why communication is broken down and why developers have become too insular. And I watched it happen. For the longest time, the gaming press was just far, far too hard on products that were not given a fair chance. And developers, more the publishers and the PR teams working for the publishers went, this is diminishing returns. Access is diminishing returns. And then with the amount of industrial espionage that happens in any tech-related industry, what that means is that people go in and they either get their friends in the press to go in and look at what the competition's doing and report back, or you know, they go in themselves and sort of steal ideas. They might not even be aware they're stealing per se, but it's so competitive that people end up doing these things, that access has dwindled and dwindled and dwindled and dwindled to the point that it's very difficult to get access nowadays, unless you're one of the really big names. And unfortunately for me, I do a cosplay show on a major gaming outlet. I don't do a game show, a regular show where I talk about video games. So I don't have that top tier access yet. And so, you know, a lot of the time I'll submit a question via email, or I'll tweet a developer, or I'll tweet a publisher, and just hear nothing. Not a no, nothing. And so what do people do when they're on that deadline? Remember that thing I said about speed versus accuracy? Well, when a publisher doesn't get back to somebody, they can't hope for accuracy, so they go for speed. So they produce an opinion piece that people end up taking as news. Even if it's labeled opinion, it is amazing to me how many people have linked me, quote unquote, evidence that is an opinion column. And the only thing an opinion column is evidence that that person had that opinion about that subject on that day, because it could have changed, right? And so there's a complete breakdown. There's a breakdown in access. And the thing you guys got to remember about video game journalism is it's not like political or public affairs reporting. There is no, I won't say no, there is some public right to know principle at play, but the reason the press has access to things like politicians, no matter what, is that their salaries are being paid for by taxpayers. So because their salaries come from taxes, we are their bosses on paper. So that's why you have access to politicians, why politicians are expected to talk to the press. A private company, it's not the same thing. A private company doesn't have to talk to you. And so we do our jobs at the mercy of games publishers. And some people treat that like it's a big evil. They piss and moan about it. It is what it is. It's the reality of this job. And so it's very important that not just gamers in this case, or cosplayers or whatever, think I'm dealing fairly with them. Publishers also have to believe, and developers also have to believe, that I'm going to be fair. And I mean, the big thing as well in terms of the public and then publishers as well is that they also feel like they're appreciated. A viewer has to feel appreciated. A reader has to feel appreciated. A developer who's giving you access to their content should feel appreciated, because that's what creates trust. It's not just, are you fair? Do you see the person you are creating content of or creating content for as another being of value? And that should be just common sense, but it isn't so much anymore. People think that they should be able to say anything they want, no matter how inaccurate or unfair, and continue to get optional access to privately produced products. And this is where I think the big breakdown is happening in video game reporting now. Why the caliber of it is still not where it should be, because it's all a shell game, right? The publishers and the publicists believe that their primary job is to avoid negative press, and so they keep everything under wraps until the very last minute, because if you can't see something, you can't find something wrong with it. But then the vacuum in coverage, the vacuum in stuff to write about, means people cover rumor and people cover conjecture, and that can lead to bad PR in itself. I mean, that's where we get these silly scandals about, no female playable characters in a game that isn't even out yet. And I don't think, personally, and I know there are people who disagree with me, and they have some valid points, but I still believe this. I don't think you can really pick at a game that way before it's out. You have to see how the game works and why they made that decision before you can really complain about it. But once the game's out, people aren't reading about the game, people are playing the game, right? So the type of coverage you do after a game is released is radically different than the type of coverage you do before. And so, I mean, in the case of Assassin's Creed Unity, I think that game got a raw deal on that front. It was buggy, yeah, and people have every right to complain about that, but the way they designed the game to try to create a cohesive experience meant that, yeah, you can't customize a character in multiplayer. It just wouldn't make sense. You're playing the same character in single player as you are in multiplayer. So yeah, he's a dude. And I'm working on some stuff talking about why that should or shouldn't matter. So that's going to be coming up in the coming weeks. But hopefully that gives people a little bit more insight into what's going on in gaming right now. I'm wrapping up now because it's a half hour now and I don't want to go too long. I am respecting your guys' time. But if you like this topic, maybe we can set up like a question and answer format or something like that where you guys can ask me questions and I answer them about games journalism, based on what I know. Maybe we can make that happen. Maybe we can do a sort of roundtable type of Feedback Friday sometime where we actually do a Q&A format. But let me know in the comments. I would ask, please, guys, it's my birthday, please be kind, but I know better than that, because the best way to get hate on the internet is to ask for kindness. I've learned that the hard way, but I'm gonna do it anyway. If you consider yourself a fan of mine, don't just be cool to me today, out of respect for me. Be cool to everybody you encounter today. If you feel the need to send that nasty tweet to someone because you think it'll change them, it won't. It'll just irritate them. Like, trust me, as someone who gets a lot of people going meh, 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 at me, thinking they're helping, thinking they're making me better, but their approach is so abrupt that, like I said, I get so much noise that just another angry person, it filters out in your brain before you can even stop it, right? And there's two things that happen in that case. You ignore them or you snark because you want a little bit of entertainment value, because to your brain, this is just another irritant. It's not useful information. And so, if you want to level that piece of criticism at somebody, well, here's the thing, guys. They've probably heard it from 25 other people already, or they will. You're not really adding anything. So I'm asking you to keep that in mind, and keep in mind that it does matter. It does make something more relevant when you can say, I really liked this. I didn't like this so much. Because someone goes, oh, you like this. This tells me what to do more of. This is now relevant information. Because I think that people don't realize that in a situation like mine, you go in fully accepting that people are going to take issue with some of the things you say. Sometimes people are just doing it because they want to draw attention to themselves. Sometimes they're doing it because they like, just for some odd reason, they like arguing with people on the internet. But you expect that, and it's like, yeah, this is just, like I said, again, it's noise. The brain treats it as noise. The minute you identify that you actually enjoy someone's content and you lead and you end with that, it's like, oh, this is a consumer. This is somebody who's a regular viewer who likes what I do. I'm going to do what I can to keep that person happy, as opposed to just somebody who's worth ignoring. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense, because it really, it's not a question of right or wrong, guys. It's a question of effectiveness. And this isn't, well, you should learn to handle criticism better. These are basic, ways the brain works things that, because of the way the brain works, it's not so easy to overcome the way the brain works. That's the way the brain works. So if you want to be more effective in enacting change, you want to be more effective in having your feedback heard, the way to do it is to, wrap that I didn't enjoy this part with I really like this and I really liked this. Because not because you're stroking someone's ego, because you're making it more relevant to that particular human being's brain. Make sense? Okay, let's wrap. Breathe in. And out. And breathe in. And out.